All right, good evening, everyone. I will call the meeting to order. And with that, I will make a motion, move to item 2 and make a motion for approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to accept the minutes with an amendment to it, with a correction.
All right,
Is there going to be a second before I talk?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you. On item 2B, it should be the town of West Hartford. And the word should be intersections in 2B. And in 2C, the word is agreement. Those are the two corrections I have, Mr. With that, I'm fine.
All right. I will just note that Mr. Hart, the appropriate staff will make that adjustment, or is that Ms. Rano will make that adjustment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Rick Ledwith, acting town manager. We will make those changes to the minutes and resubmit them.
Okay. And with that, moving on to item B, which is calling the Ms. LeBreau.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is Essie LeBreau, Town Clerk, and the resolution before you is appropriating money from our historic document preservation funds. These are funds that are we are given for each land record. We keep a certain amount of funds, and it goes into the Historic Document Preservation Fund. And it is to be used expressly for maintaining, preserving our historic documents. And that's everything from land records to vital records to council minutes and boards and commissions. So the money accumulates each year. It gets rolled over if it's not used. And I've been saving up to do some work on our vault. So what the plan is to have additional land record cabinets installed, and because we are basically running out of space, and that these cabinets will last at least for 10 more years of accumulation of books. So once we do it now, we're good for 10 years. We want maybe more, and we won't have to worry about purchasing additional storage. The other items are in professional services. Due to our virtual nature with Fair Rent Commission and some of our meetings, we've had to pay for transcription services, a court reporter specifically, and they were more frequent, the Fair Rent Commission, than we had planned. So money can go towards that as well. And then the software maintenance is basically microfilming these records. So it all falls in within the law of the state library and their regulations regarding how we can use those funds. Any questions?
Oh, it sounds like you have a great plan on how to use those. I would be unwise to question that.
Thank you.
You guys, I'm sorry. I'm not on screen because I'm under the weather. This is Mary. Thank you, Essie. Of course, state record preservation is very important for all of us. I commend you on this effort. The only question I ask is not what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's just, is there a way to do it? I know it's a lot of paper and it's a lot of, voluminous things and books, etc. Is there a way to do it a little bit more automated? I grew up in the day with financial records. It was all microfiche and everything else. And maybe that's the only way we can do it. I just want to help you, help yourself. So is there some other automation available that we should be investing in to preserve these?
That's a really good question, Ms. Fay, because it's up to the state library to make those decisions on what we must keep on paper. And our association has been actively involved every year working with the state library and trying to find ways if we can automate, do it electronically. We still have to keep paper according to the state library. And the retention schedule tells us what is permanent. And these are the documents that I'm focusing on, only the permanent ones that are required by the state library. We will continue to work on that though. And land records, vital records, there's no other way right now than having them in a paper copy. That's the history of our town. Maybe down the road, boards and commissions or something like that might be required, but it is the state library that is responsible for all those rules and regulations.
No, I appreciate that. Maybe we can, this is a bipartisan collaborative effort, and maybe, Lamb and I can get together and try to advocate with our, state people and try to make records for everything. And it's very important to archive them properly.
Yes.
I stand by your efforts and what you're doing, and thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fay. And with that, Mr. Dave, I don't believe you had any questions on that.
None, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So we will move on to item C. I believe, Mr. Ledwith, you would like to speak on that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. Next, we have a review of the parking agreement between the Town of West Hartford Center Special Services District and the Farmington Avenue acquisitions. And by way of review, this agreement is a result of the 920-924 Farmington Avenue Special Development District development that was approved by the Town Council back in January. And as part of that agreement, the town had agreed to provide the development up to 24 spaces in the Isham garage to accommodate their proposed development. You may recall through that approval process, the development required a total of 81 total spaces during their peak demand, and they only had 57 on-site spaces available for that development. We did have, as you recall, they had a parking study completed that showed Isham Garage has ample space available to accommodate this agreement. Peak utilization during a weekday shows 265 spaces available, and peak utilization on a Saturday, which is one of our higher days, that would show 201 spaces available during those time periods. So again, ample space available within Isham to accommodate this agreement. At this point, I'll turn it over to our Deputy Corporation Counsel, Gina Verano, who can walk us through the terms of the agreement. Gina?
Yep.
Through you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is the parking agreement between the Town of West Hartford and West Hartford Center Special Services District and Farmington Avenue acquisitions. So when you approved the Special Development District, you did so acting as the zoning authority for the Town of West Hartford. You're here in the capacity now as the owner of the parking garage, and the Special Services District is here as the operator and the collection of revenue from the parking garage. So as Mr. Ledwith mentioned, the SCD approval allowed the owner to satisfy the parking requirements under zoning by obtaining a parking agreement with the Town of West Hartford and Special Services District for parking spaces in the Isham garage. And it's not less than 20 years and up to 24 parking spaces. So this is Farmington Avenue acquisitions request to enter into that parking agreement. I have been working with the council for Farmington Avenue acquisitions, and we have heavily negotiated the terms of this parking agreement, and I'm here to recommend it as currently drafted. So I'll just highlight a few of it. So of course it's the term, and the term has to be for 20 years if the owner is going to meet his obligations for the zoning approval. So the term is for 20 years. It does give the owner the ability to renew it for 10 years apiece. But it also gives the town and the district some flexibility with respect to terminating the agreement. So the town and the district have the ability to terminate this agreement if sometime in the future, either sells, transfers, leases, or otherwise transfers its interest in the parking garage. So that gives the town and the district, I think, the flexibility that's required should there be some future sale or transfer of our interest in the parking garage. If we do sell it after year 20, the buyer is obligated to maintain the agreement through year 30. And then, of course, after year 30, if we still own it, we can terminate it. What's interesting here is the zoning approval speaks to parking spaces, but that's not how we actually do parking. We do it by monthly parking agreements. So while the agreement says spaces, because that's what's required in the zoning approval, we really speak in terms of parking license, if you will. And so this agreement allows up to 36 parking spaces. That's a little bit higher ask than was required by the zoning approval. The owner has asked that to accommodate some perhaps part-time employees. And so he'll need some additional parking spaces. So he has the right to purchase up to 13 sort of monthly licenses to park in the garage. As I mentioned, we have a couple parties to the agreement. The town of West Hartford is the owner of the parking garage, and as such, it's a signatory. The district is the one that operates and collects the revenue and turns that over to the town, and as such, that entity is also a signatory. The parking operations for this owner is the same as for anyone else who is utilizing the parking garage. That is to say, they're required to sign the same monthly agreement. They're required to pay the same monthly fee. And if the fee does go up, they are similarly required to pay the increased fee. There's the standard 30-day default, which is true in every agreement. This one's a little bit different because it's tied to the zoning approval. And so if the owner violates the zoning approval in any way, it does give the town and the district the ability to terminate this agreement. So I guess at this point, I'll take any specific questions. I think the parking agreement was uploaded to the schedule or the agenda, as well as a draft resolution. The resolution that you see is designed for the Special Services District because that is on the agenda for tomorrow night at the Special Services District. So it would look the same way, except for the word Special Services District, it would say the town of West Hartford. So, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions at this point, I'm happy to address them.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. I appreciate that. I just wanted, could you point people to where this talks about the financial agreement?
So you'd go to section 5, which says parking operations.
Mhm.
And that's where the owner will be subject to generally applicable rules established by the district and the town. So same rules apply to them as apply to everybody else. Subsection B, parking in the Ishmael garage shall be subject to such parking programs, fees, and rates as may be established by the town or the district from time to time. Owner, again, is required to pay the same fees as everyone else. And subsection C, the owner is required to provide the same information to the district as any other owner who wants to utilize the parking garage.
And so the owner takes on those costs and then passes them along to their lessees, or?
It may
Right.
or may not do that. I think the owner is still working out what that looks like, but under this agreement, it's obligated to pay the parking fee. And then the town planner can at any time request that the owner provide documentation that is satisfying its parking requirements under the zoning approval.
Okay. And then my other question is, this isn't just unique to this one developer. Does the town have a similar arrangement with the apartments that are in Blueback?
Well, this is a very unique situation, and there is nothing similar to this arrangement. What you will find in the Blueback Square is not a commitment to provide parking. It's just that there are public parking available there for use by patrons of Blueback Square as well as the owners. There is some sort of a parking arrangement with Delamar, but that's pursuant to a ground lease between the town and Delamar. So this is a one-off, extremely unique situation because it's required by the zoning approval, or it allows the owner to satisfy his zoning requirement by entering into this agreement.
So with the Blueback example, those tenants are responsible for their own parking fees, and this would be the only rental property that is fronting this cost for its leases in an agreement with the town.
Again, as far as I know, but I don't think the owner has fully sorted that out himself yet, whether he's going to pass along the fees or not.
Just on paper, how that trickles down is a different story, but
Right.
on paper, that's what we have.
Right.
Okay. And is this in your due diligence and significant research, as you always do with anything dealing with property? Are there other similar examples of this in other communities where a private entity is purchasing parking from doesn't necessarily need to be a public entity, because Blueback is kind of unique, but another entity for parking?
It is rare, only because typically a public garage was built with public funds and bonds. And so there are restrictive covenants in those bonds that prohibit a municipality from assigning a certain portion of the public garage. And if they exceed that limitation, I think it might be 10% now, the bonds convert from non-taxable to taxable. So there's always an incentive to keep those agreements down. There's also an incentive on behalf of the municipality to keep them to a minimum in the event that the municipality in the future wants to sell or lease the garage or otherwise enter into a public-private partnership. When they do arise, in the few instances that I'm aware of, they relate to zoning approval as a requirement to satisfy the parking requirements in an underlying zoning approval.
All right. Well, I don't want to rehash that whole public hearing that we had on this issue. And we discussed this issue. This is an interesting arrangement. I'm glad that people were really creative, because I think that that property is going to be a great development in town. I'm excited that the town staff was able to be creative with them. And I don't know, Mr. Davidoff or Councilor Fay, if you have any questions. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Corporation Counsel. In reading the agreement, it doesn't really say as to the effective date as to when payments would be due. Would that be upon the issuance of a certificate of occupancy? The agreement just says that we're going to have a start date for the agreement. We don't have a start date for when we're going to receive payments.
Yes, that's correct. So the term of the agreement is 20 years. It starts with the first certificate of occupancy and goes for 20 years. The payment obligation depends on when the owner needs to utilize the parking. And so if in the first year or so it has adequate parking on site, then there's no need for them to utilize the parking in the Ishmael garage. If it turns out that perhaps they've got a number of tenants in the residential units, less in the commercial units, there's not enough on-site parking, then we would be using the Isham garage. So it's in flux, but the agreement says that they have that we have to make at least up to 34 parking spaces available to them. So in other words, in the first year, maybe they do nothing because they have adequate on-site and they're building out the property. Maybe in year 5 or 6, they're going to need all 36 of those parking spaces. It's going to depend on the ultimate unit mix and the occupancy.
So my question, through you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, when do the payments start? Because there's no date certain. I understand that what you just said, but I think that's a material term that needs to be specified in here, because when we gave the zoning approval, they needed a parking waiver, and the only way that the entire site would work was to have this parking license arrangement with the town to do that. So I don't know whether it should be incumbent upon when they choose to use the garage, okay? I think it would be in our best interest to have it start, I think it'd be fair when the first certificate of occupancy, is issued. And I don't think they're going to be able to get a certificate of occupancy for just one apartment. It's going to have to be all the units. I understand that the commercial may not be there at the same time, but I don't really have a problem with that. But if the issue is that they don't have enough parking for the residential tenants, then I think that needs to be the trigger date, and I think we should specify that in here. If the trigger is where they don't have enough parking on site, is the occupancy for the businesses, and I guess the planner would know better as to what would trigger that. I'm just saying, I think maybe that term ought to be there, because I think they could come back and say, well, you know what, we didn't need them yet. We didn't need them yet. We didn't need them yet. And you know what? I don't know, so I think we need to be protecting our interest in terms of, maximizing our revenue on the deal, because we're providing relief to them, equitable relief, so that this project could go forward. And I just don't want us to be in a position where we have to monitor the situation as to when those parking spaces are necessary.
So Councilor Davidoff, we did discuss that issue at length, both with the attorney for the owner, and I discussed it at length with our town planner, Todd DeMay, because the issue is whether or not they start paying for the 36 parking spaces on day one and continue that for the 20-year term. After discussions with the owner and the town planner, really what provided the most flexibility for both and ultimately for the owner is that they only need to pay for the parking spaces when they need them. So how is that going to work? So when they build up those particular spaces, they're going to have to get a CO, they're going to have to get a building permit. And when they come forward and requesting the CO, the town planner is going to check, is there adequate parking? And if there's not adequate parking on site, then he'll make a request for documentation to evidence the payment of a license agreement for the parking garage. Because again, the owner's not really sure at this point what's going to be built out first, what portion is going to be occupied first, and frankly, whether or not and whom they're going to put on site and who they're going to ask to move to, and park in the Ishmael garage. And so this is the way in which we could finalize a parking agreement today so that the owner could go forward, get the financing, and start the development.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that we should bear the burden of determining whether or not the resident in 2C needs 1 or 2 parking spaces. Okay. It's just too much for us to do. So you want a parking license with the town of West Hartford. It comes with, you ask for 36 spaces, you should basically pay for 36 spaces. And then it's on you to figure it out, because we have no idea if visitors are coming there or who's living there and how many cars they may have. And I guess if it pans out that they don't need all 36, then I think the burden should be upon them to come to us and say, well, 36 might be too much. It's not working in terms of our model. I think maybe we'd be fine with just, the 24. But I really would like to know a date certain for collecting the revenue. I think that makes sense. I don't know if my colleagues would agree, but I could be persuaded if I heard a stronger argument. But I think that makes sense to me in terms of a fairness argument.
Sorry, Leon.
I'm done. Thank you.
No. Very. If I may, through you, Chairman Sweeney, I actually agree 100% with Leon. and we probably all do. I think from a fairness standpoint that developers and development needs to stand on its own. And yes, we have to do certain things and maybe make some accommodations from time to time for a very special, unique, large project to make it work. But in this case, I just don't think it's incumbent upon the town to, assume and pay for things that they develop. You either want the property or you don't. I know that's rather simplistic. There's a lot more to parking, and I've certainly learned from that over the years with listening to the presentations. But I agree that Mr. Davidoff said it, maybe in a different way, but we should not be assuming risk for financial or other, results from an enterprise. We can work with them, we can do certain things, but the developer or whoever wants to come to town needs to be reasonable too. So thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to piggyback on this. One of the things that we hear from developers when they come to us for final approval after they've gone through, the many phases in town is that they want consistency, right? They want to know what they're walking into. And I think one of the things that we look for from developers when they put something forward to us is that they're going to stand by what they put before us. And I think what we have here today is a little bit off from both of those things, where we're not necessarily living up to what we said that we were going to be doing. We're not necessarily creating a level playing field for everyone either, because when we made this decision to move in this direction for this development, we gave them, you all, the staff, did a lot of the work to help them get approval, to allow for them to have these extra spots. And now they want to see how it goes. And I agree with Mr. Davidoff and Ms. Fay about this, that it is definitely not upon us to figure out whether or not they can finance this project or not, based on a parking agreement. They should have had that prepared before they came to the table here. We constantly have heard, and we've heard this story before, I think we all are aware of that, in regards to having folks tell us, they need to get financing and so on and so forth. But we've done what we were supposed to do on the council side, in green lighting this for the town. And now we're getting a little bit of a different story here about when they think that they should have to pay for those parking spots that are required, per our own zoning requirements. So I think the staff, you guys have gone up above and beyond to make this project work, and I second what both Councilor Fay, so does my son over here seconds it as well, as you can't hear him in the background. Just think that we need to. One of the things that I find very interesting about developers when they come to town is an inconsistency of, they want a level playing field, but they can constantly change that field, and I feel like that is kind of what we're getting here a little bit. And as Mr. Davidoff said, I would be 100% open to hearing a separate argument on that. But I think we definitely need, if they're going to start moving, they need to start sticking to an agreement of paying for what they're supposed to have. So I go back, Gina, by all means.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that I'm correct, and that I'm understanding where you're going. And so the way this agreement would be revised would be that when the first certificate of occupancy is issued, whether it's a CO or a temporary CO, the developer would be required to pay for and obtain the 24 parking spaces that are required under the zoning approval. They would be required to pay for those monthly until the expiration of the zoning approval or something shorter. The zoning approval, of course, goes in perpetuity. So as I understand it, Counselor Davidoff, it's when they get the CO, you want the corresponding obligation for them to pay for the 24 parking spaces. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, because I think had they had adequate parking on their site or explored other ways to get parking on their site, that all would have been baked in to their proposal. So they would have had to pay for that on day one, whether or not they were building a parking structure or doing something else to make it happen. So I just think that's fair. I just don't want us to be burdened to determine who's occupying what apartment and who's coming and going. That's not our business. We're not in the business of regulating tenant use of parking spaces. We're in the business, or the district's in the business of leasing parking spaces. And that's what they're buying, parking spaces. And they need these parking spaces to meet their zoning approval. So it's not really a surprise or an unknown burden at this point. It is certain, it was pretty clear that they needed this to get council approval, because otherwise the zoning application would have fit. If this was not given, but for this, it would have been denied. So I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that's a good starting point. If they determine that they don't need, I wouldn't charge them for 36, but if that's where they come up is the 24, then the 24. If later they determine 24 is because of the way transportation has taken a drastic turn, I don't know if you can, it's an STD, so you can modify the terms. So they could come back and ask for a modification. So that's feasible. So I don't think this would be in perpetuity if transportation modes change. So, but that's what they are right now. And I think that's reasonable. I think it's fair.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, consistency, like we just want to be consistent and be able to say to people that are coming to the town, that these are your requirements, you have them, you know what they are, and as you said, Gina, earlier, that, this is unique. This is a unique parking situation. I just want to put my developer hat on here. Like, you want to know what you're walking into, those words that have been said to us over and over again before all these council meetings. We want consistency. We just want to know what we're working with. And I think that has to be consistent from the town to the developer as well, so that when people come, they're not having the meeting with us and then having a separate meeting with you all, that puts you, as Mr. Davidoff said, puts you in kind of a burdensome position where you have to kind of relay a different message to us, which I think is just inconsistent and creates this kind of a different level of authorization here. And I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I just think that, to Mr. Davidoff's point, if they need to change it, then they can formally come before us and change it in the right process that everyone else has to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, and Mr. Davidoff, thank you for your comments there. So with that, I'll move on to staff reports and financial services update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. Our Finance Director, Peter Privatera, is with us this evening. He will walk through the operating results as of March.
Can I pause you for a minute and just go back to a question that I have here? So with this, just timing wise on the resolution, so this is scheduled for tomorrow, right?
It is scheduled for a special services district meeting at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening.
Okay.
So would we have to materially change this agreement Attorney Barano? Prior to,
Yes, Mr. Chair. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the Owners Council, and if they are in agreement with this new term, then I will present it to the Special Services District, and then I would recommend that the council open the agenda, suspend the rules, and put this resolution on its agenda for tomorrow night as well. If I don't reach an agreement with the owner in advance of tomorrow's meeting, then we will not be addressing it at Special Service District, and it will not show up on your agenda.
All right, thank you. I just wanted clarity on that timing. I appreciate it. So, Mr. Ledwith, I will let you pick up where you left
sure,
off.
thank you.
And thank you, Attorney Barano.
So we do have Peter Privatera, our Chief Financial Officer, with us this evening. He will go through the operating results as of March of 2022, which does show us at a current surplus of almost $1.3 million, which is very good news. And I will let Peter summarize his memo that he provided to the committee. Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Privatera.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ledwith, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Ledwith stated, our projection has improved since the last time we came before this committee. We're projecting slightly under a $1.3 million surplus. Our revenue continues to improve from the tax revenue side. In all tax categories, we're expecting an increase of slightly under 1.9 million. The bulk of it coming from current year property tax collections, which are exceeding our adopted collection rate. Supplemental motor vehicle showed a significant increase, primarily based on the fact that new and used vehicles are quite more expensive now because of the greater demand and the less supply. We did very well on prior year taxes and interest and liens as well. From our intergovernmental revenue account, we have been reporting all along that we did receive some additional funds from FEMA for COVID expenses dating back to last year. We did receive some additional funding for Dial-A-Ride, additional funding for a state pilot program, some grant money for the police department for the auto theft task force, and some justice grants and DUI driving grants. We also are doing very well in our charges for services. We're projecting an overage of over $500,000, basically building permits, fire plan reviews, conveyance, taxes. I mean, the only category that we showed a drop in, and I think I've reported this all along, was miscellaneous revenue because of the low interest rates. But the interest rates are climbing, so I'm expecting that as we move into next fiscal year, our estimates for interest income will improve with the higher interest rates. From an expense category, police and fire are showing overages. However, we're able to revise our fire estimates back a little. We had been reporting that we were waiting for the impact of all these new fire recruits to hit the line, and we were going to reassess what our overtime was, and it's made a significant impact. So the fire department, although we're projecting them to be roughly $700,000 over budget, we did move them back in our estimate. You know, there have been retirements in fire. There have been retirements payouts, roughly 233,000. I think the only concern we have at this point with the police department is the fact that they have a lot of vacancies. And because they have a lot of vacancies, we're projecting their overtime to increase. They also had a number of retirements. I believe they had 9 retirements with payouts totaling over $222,000. You know, we're going to monitor the police department budget closely, but we are projecting a conservative estimate for the police department. And then, of course, we have that situation in leisure and social services where the flooding of that apartment complex resulted in an unexpended liability related to unbudgeted liability, excuse me, related to finding a shelter for all those folks. My expectation, the other categories are minor, but my expectation is that as we move into the end of the fiscal year, the surplus will get better. We have some conservative estimates here. This was dated as of March 31st, and even after this date, recently, I had a conversation with the tax collector, and her collections are still getting better. And also in some other categories such as building permits, I believe we're going to do better. On the expenditure side, we have a number of departments. For instance, the Public Works Department. We're going to start dialing them back with their estimates for winter storm events and all that. Although we do encourage John, and he moves forward on it to fill his salt domes by the end of the fiscal year, so we'd have full salt domes starting the new fiscal year. So my expectation is that this will improve. I believe we're in pretty good shape moving forward, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
I'm not seeing any other questions. This is obviously good news. Love to hear that. And I don't know. No one else has any questions. I just have a question for the future, and it's more of seeing that how the money is coming in on various different grants that we are applying for, or do you have, Peter, at some place? I'm sure you do, because you are meticulous. Kind of what are we applying for annually? Like what are things that what grants that we're looking at down the road? And that would be something that would be interesting to discuss at some point on the finance committee, just to kind of have an understanding of what the town is looking to get reimbursed for. What are the things that we're looking to be aggressive at the state level, things of that nature.
Certainly, we can provide the committee with a list of grants that we often go after. A number of them are with the police department. Distracted driving, DUI. Now there's this auto theft task force grant, dial-a-ride grants we go after every year. We do have a number, and I can provide the committee with grants that we normally apply for, and we don't budget for them when we adopt a budget, because we're not sure what the amounts are or if we're going to get them. But the police department is very vigilant when it comes to applying for those grants, and we seem to be getting them every year.
Excuse me. All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I also, while I have you and Mr. Ledwood, I wanted to tell you that on a somewhat similar note, I actually met a person who, on an issue that we've talked about a lot on this committee, that was displaced during that time period during one of the apartment buildings was wiped out completely, and the town stepped in, and they stopped me in my tracks and just said, "We really appreciate all the work that your staff has done to do this, the services you guys provided us, and the consistency that you've been there for us is really changed our life. It could have been a lot worse." So I wanted to pass that along to you all, because you guys have been doing the bulk of that work, and we've really just been kind of here listening, but people are really appreciative of all the stuff that you guys did. I know that's been a topic on this committee for many meetings, so I wanted you all to have that. It wasn't well played. It wasn't appropriate for me to get that. You guys should be receiving that information, and I just wanted to say how it was a proud moment to be able to say, we have a great team working on it. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll pass those accolades on to our social services staff, who've been working very hard with this group of 33 individuals, making sure they have adequate housing. So we're just tracking the numbers. They're doing the hard work on the street. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to the next item as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. We have Kathy Lombardi, who's our Acting Human Resources Director, with us this evening. You all had a chance to meet Kathy during the budget workshop process, and Kathy will give an overview of her, a brief overview of her report. The one thing I would highlight at the beginning of her report talks through a number of recruitments that are ongoing. The one I really wanted to touch base with all of you on personally was the equity officer position, which, as you know, we've been in that process of recruiting for that position. We did run a recruitment. We interviewed a number of folks. We interviewed some highly qualified individuals who were certainly capable of doing this job. What we were looking for were folks who were ready to move more into a leadership capacity because of this position being solely in charge of driving our equity work throughout the entire organization. We felt someone with a little bit more of a leadership background, and some of the folks that we met with were more, they would be great folks to work on a team. And at some point be a leader in this area, just they weren't quite ready, we felt, to move right into that leadership role. That being said, we do have something that we're considering right now that we're not quite ready to talk about publicly. But our plan B, which is really going to be a great plan A, will be prepared to talk to the committee hopefully next month with an outcome there for that very difficult position. So at this point, I'll turn the rest of the report over to Kathy through you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here tonight. I'll go through the report through you, Chairman Sweeney. We've been very busy doing recruiting, and I have to say, in reference to Peter's comment about the police, we have had a big uptick in applicants for police officers. And recently, we had, I think we're probably 2 or 3 officers down at this point, provided no one else retires. And we're actually looking at, I was talking with Lieutenant Moffa, who's working very closely with our department, and we'll probably be able to start building a list to use off of the applicants that we've got. So that's really good news. And we've got some really great candidates. And it seems that the best tool lately has been word of mouth. So we're definitely looking up on that side. I know we just this last week did interviews for the fire inspector, and again, a fabulous pool of applicants, really strong, qualified people. People are coming to the point now where they're saying, you know, they wish they could hire more than one person off the list. So it speaks very highly of West Hartford, and even in these times that we're able to attract good candidates. So I think it's very positive. And we've also done a lot of promotional recruitments. The Revenue Services representative was a promotional placement in-house, along with operations specialist. So I think that's another really positive point for our employees to have the opportunity to have career growth in their career path here. So we'll be doing the firefighter paramedic interviews coming up in the end of May, and we have a strong applicant pool on that side too. And we're interviewing in human resources for 1, maybe 2 positions. And we just received a position from the library, which will probably be a promotional. So as you can see, a lot of activity, a lot of movement, but very positive outcomes. So I'm happy to report that. Our training with the consultant for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion program has completed for all the full-time staff. We have trained 224 of our full-time staff across the board in all departments. And those trainings have been tailored specifically to the groups that we've presented to. And we're doing some other planning for training with Public Works, some leadership supervisory training for staff that we're working with our employee assistance program provider, along with some other programs. We'll be doing onboarding for the leisure services employees, which is a big push with summer. We have quite a few part-time employees that will be joining us, and we'll be doing a orientation program for them coming up in the middle of May. Risk management, our risk manager has worked on putting together a emergency procedure guide, which will be available in all departments and is a comprehensive booklet that gives direction on what to do in certain emergencies. And she's busy with her renewal, which is currently underway. Under the benefits, we are getting ready for our July 1st open enrollment for our medical coverage. And we'll be doing that again online through Munis, which we had success doing last year, and we'll continue with that in the next month or so. We are currently winding up. Finally, the union contracts have been checked and rechecked and checked again. So it looks like we'll be signing those in the next week or two for the retro contracts, and hopefully we'll be able to start new with the upcoming year. Employee relations, we are continuing to work with that committee to look at ways to give our employees a few incentives and some recognition. So all in all, we've been a little busy working in that department. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Delo.
I don't really have a question. I just have a positive comment. I think the position that we are in with respect to the recruitment and hiring of public safety employees was really good news this evening to hear. That's something that we have struggled with for a period of time, and we've obviously seen the great exodus of very talented and well-trained individuals who did their time and left, and there was always the wonder as to would we be able to find individuals who would be interested in filling these positions. And I think your report this evening indicated that we're in a really good position, and I think because we are, this will make the numbers that usually appear in Mr. Privatera's monthly reports look much better with respect to the overtime. So I think that is really key, and a success story. Mr. Privatera had really positive news. You had really positive news, and these are things that I think speak beyond just an individual department. It really speaks to our organization as a whole on how we all are interconnected and how we all work together to reach that goal. And I think if people view West Hartford as a good place to work, where they receive good training, receive the resources necessary to perform their job, there's advancement opportunities, then I think there will be a strong likelihood that people will apply to work here. And I think the thing that you mentioned tonight, that we're going to have a list of people as backups ready to go should things happen. I haven't heard that discussion around a committee meeting in years. So that is really positive news, and it really reflects on what everybody does on a daily basis, and that is just it's hard to well, we'll be able to quantify it because we'll see budgetary savings there, but it will also, I think, speak to the organization itself. And the other thing that you mentioned was employee recognition. And that's something that I've always felt has been the most important thing that we can do as an employer, is to recognize people. We understand that, some people, oh, they're just doing their job. Well, you know what? It's more than doing their job. It's being a public servant to our community. And everyone likes to be told they're doing a good job. And a paycheck sometimes is just not enough. And to be recognized amongst your peers that you went beyond the call of duty or did something, it incentivizes others, and it makes it evident to our residents when they interact with the various people in the department. They say, wow, that person was really helpful, or wow, I didn't think I would get such fast results, or didn't think the person would have the answer, but they did. And as a policymaker, it just makes our job a lot easier, because people don't call us up and say, hey, can you help me out, get through this bureaucratic maze. So we're doing all the right things, and I think teamwork is key to that. And I'm really excited to learn more and just keep going, because we're definitely going in the right direction. And tonight's meeting is full of good news. So I'm just waiting to hear what the next report is, and hopefully there'll be some more good news. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will echo what you said, because we have partnered with the police department and have had collaborative conversations about work together on to improve the process, and we have. So I think it is definitely a team effort, and it just so happens we're on a good uptick, so we'll stay there. Thank you.
Excellent. Ditto to what Mr. Davidoff said. Great news on that front, and it should pass along the optimism that Mr. Davidoff had to the Board of Ed as they go on their major search as well. People want to work here. So with that, we will move to, I think, item C. Mr. Ledwith was covered slightly by Ms. LeBreau earlier.
It was, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, acting town manager. Our town clerk had to step out and attend another meeting. She did provide her normal statistics that she provides in her quarterly report, and then the bulk of the report was the appropriation of funds from the Historic Document Preservation Fund. So if you have any questions on her stats, certainly let me know, but otherwise that would conclude Ms. LeBreau's report.
I am all set. At this point, we'll move into executive session pursuant to sections 1-206B regarding discussions of a pending claim. I need Ms. Verano, do I need a second to move into Mr. Davidoff may have a second. And do we need to come back in? We do not, I believe, right?
We do not. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, do I need to say anything technical to make sure that I'm abiding by all of our FOI laws?
No, that's accurate, Mr. Chair. You just want to invite two other people. That would be, well, in addition to the town manager, that would be me and Helen Rubino Turco.
I would like to invite Helen Rubino Turco, Rick Ledwith, and Gina Verano to our executive session. And without objection, we will adjourn this regular meeting into executive session. Bye all.